All right, so today we're going to dive into something a little different,
Okay.
a world that's a bit more intense than our usual topics.
Oh,
We're going to explore the world of Hitman.
wow. That is pretty intense.
I know it's a bit dark, but honestly, isn't that
Yeah.
kind of fascinating?
It is fascinating in a disturbing sort of way.
Yeah.
In a disturbing way.
One of those subjects that just grabs your attention
Yeah,
and makes you think about the extremes of human behavior.
absolutely. And to guide us through this,
Okay.
we're looking at excerpts from Becoming a Hitman,
Yeah.
a research paper by Ken Levi.
I've heard of this one, yeah.
Yeah, so he conducted these really in-depth interviews with people who have actually
Wow.
lived this life,
Really?
especially focusing on one individual that he calls Pete.
Interesting.
Yeah, and what's really insightful about Levi's work is that he goes beyond just describing what hitmen do.
Right.
He really digs into their mindset.
I see.
So how does someone reach the point where taking another person's life
Yeah.
becomes a job, right? How do you even...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really complex question.
Well, let's unpack this a little bit.
Oh.
One of the first things that really struck me in Levi's research
Yeah.
is how hitmen like Pete approach their actions with a sense of,
With a sense of what?
and I can't believe I'm saying this,
Rare.
professionalism.
Wow. Yeah, that's chilling, isn't it?
It's chilling.
They treat it as a service they provide. They talk
Yes.
about strategy planning, execution.
It's like they're running a business.
Almost like they're running a business.
So if we think about this from a sociological perspective,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
using the idea of functionalism,
Right.
would it be fair to say that hitmen see themselves as serving a function within a larger system, a twisted function?
That's a really interesting point.
I don't know.
And Levi's research does suggest that he
Good.
quotes Pete talking about being the necessary evil,
Oh, wow.
someone who takes care of problems that others can't or won't.
So they're filling a particular role.
So yes, there's a definite sense that they see themselves filling a particular role.
It's mind-blowing.
It is.
They have this whole system of reputation and status
Right.
within their world,
Absolutely.
like any other profession.
Levi talks about how Pete had to earn his place,
Oh, really?
prove his skills, and build a reputation for reliability.
Wow.
It's like the dark side of achieving status.
Yeah, the dark side of achievement,
Exactly.
and this whole idea of detachment,
Right.
of being able to emotionally distance themselves from the act of taking a life.
Yes.
That's got to play a huge role.
It's essential for them to function.
Okay.
Levi describes it as a gradual process.
Oh, so it doesn't happen overnight.
No. Initially, there's a lot of internal conflict anxiety,
Oh, I bet.
even guilt.
Yeah.
But over time, they develop coping mechanisms.
So it's not like they're simply born without a conscience.
Not at all.
Okay.
It's more about actively suppressing certain emotions,
Uh-huh.
compartmentalizing their thoughts.
So they're basically training their minds.
Levi describes it as a kind of mental training, almost like a soldier preparing for battle.
Wow.
They build walls in their minds to block out the emotional consequences.
That's both fascinating and horrifying at the same time.
Is a strange duality.
It makes you wonder, what are those mental techniques?
Right, what are they doing?
Do they have like specific rituals or beliefs that help them justify what they do?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And Levi does touch on that in his research.
Oh, really?
He found that some hitmen develop elaborate justifications for their actions.
Like what?
For example, they might convince themselves that they're doing a public service
Oh, wow.
by eliminating bad people.
So it's kind of like any other form of cognitive dissonance.
Yes,
We all do it to some extent
we do.
when we need to reconcile conflicting beliefs or actions.
Right.
But in this case, the stakes are just so much higher.
Exactly. And the consequences are far more profound.
Yeah, it's not just about justifying a little white lie.
Oh,
It's about justifying taking a human life.
that's the difference.
And that brings us to a really disturbing question.
Okay.
How does this moral detachment develop?
Right. Where does it come from?
Yeah, I mean, what happens in a person's life,
Yeah.
in their mind,
Yeah.
to allow them to reach that point?
Well, Levi points to a few key factors.
Okay.
And one that really stands out is the role of social isolation.
Okay, so they're kind of cutting themselves off.
Many of the hitmen he interviewed had very limited social connections
I see.
outside of the criminal underworld.
So they're not exactly surrounded by people who are going to challenge their worldview.
Exactly. And that lack of exposure to different perspectives
Yeah,
can reinforce their distorted moral compass.
right.
It creates a kind of echo chamber where their actions are not only accepted,
Hmm.
but sometimes even praised.
Which makes you wonder,
Yeah.
Does their profession cause this isolation?
Right.
Or are they drawn to this line of work because they already feel isolated?
That's a bit of a chicken and egg question, isn't it?
It is.
And Levi acknowledges that it's probably a combination of both.
Okay.
Certain personality traits might predispose someone to this path.
I see.
And then the nature of the work itself
Right.
further reinforces their isolation.
And what does this tell us about the importance of social connections
Wow.
and how they shape our moral development?
I think it highlights the critical role of social interaction
Okay.
in shaping our values and beliefs.
Wow.
We learn about right and wrong, acceptable and unacceptable behavior
Right.
through our interactions with others.
Okay.
When those interactions are limited, or when we're surrounded by people who condone harmful behavior,
Right.
our moral compass can become distorted.
Makes you think about the environments we create for ourselves.
It does.
And the company we keep.
It's a chilling reminder that our social circles can have a profound impact
Absolutely.
on our moral development.
Okay, that's some serious food for thought.
It is.
And there's so much more to uncover. We've just scratched the surface of this complex and unsettling world.
I agree.
But before we dive deeper, let's take a moment to really absorb what we've learned so far.
Okay.
Let it sink in a little bit.
Let it sink in. Yeah. It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
About how malleable our morality might be.
Yeah, it challenges our assumptions about good and evil,
Right.
about free will and determinism.
For sure.
I mean, we all like to believe that we have a strong moral core.
Yeah.
But what if it's more malleable than we think?
That's a question that Levi's research really forces us to confront.
Yeah.
He's not saying that people are simply products of their environment,
Right.
but he does highlight this powerful interplay between individual psychology and social forces.
Right. And one of the most striking things about his findings
Yeah.
is this paradox that's at the heart of it all.
Oh, okay.
On the one hand, murder is universally condemned.
Right. Of course it's a violation.
It's a violation of the most fundamental societal norms.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
I mean, we have laws, punishments,
Right.
religious prohibitions,
Right. All designed to prevent it.
all designed to prevent this very act. And yet here we have these individuals
Yeah.
who not only engage in murder,
Right.
but they've built an entire profession around it.
It's a fascinating paradox.
It is. It's like they're living in a parallel universe
It really is.
where the rules are different,
Yeah.
where the consequences don't seem to apply.
And that's what makes it so crucial to understand.
Yeah.
It's not just about studying a deviant subculture.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how individuals can rationalize behavior that
Yeah.
society deems abhorrent.
So it's not necessarily about a lack of morals.
I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
It's about a reframing of them.
Okay, so they've constructed their own moral code.
Precisely. They've constructed their own moral code.
Wow.
A code that allows them to function in this incredibly dark world.
Right.
And that code often involves a sense of twisted justice, a belief that they're serving a higher purpose.
So they're finding a way to kind of bypass that guilt and remorse.
It's like they've created a mental loophole
Yeah.
that allows them to bypass the guilt and remorse that most of us would feel.
Right. And that loophole is often reinforced by
Right.
the very nature of their work.
Yes. They operate in a world of secrecy, anonymity, and detachment.
And you mentioned secrecy and anonymity.
Yeah.
Is there kind of a code of silence that governs their interactions with each other?
Absolutely. There's a very strict code of conduct
I see.
within this world.
Wow.
Loyalty, discretion, and professionalism are paramount.
Okay.
Betrayal is punished severely,
Oh, wow.
and information is shared on a need-to-know basis.
So it's not a very friendly.
Levi describes it as a culture of fear and paranoia,
Right.
where everyone is suspicious of everyone else.
Not exactly a warm and fuzzy community.
Not at all. It's a world built on violence and mistrust.
Right.
And that constant fear further contributes to their isolation and detachment from mainstream society.
Right. So they're really living in the shadows.
They live in the shadows, cut off from the social norms and moral constraints
Yep.
that govern most of our lives.
So it's like they're trapped in this
Yeah.
self-perpetuating cycle
It is a cycle.
where their isolation reinforces their worldview.
Right.
And their worldview justifies their continued isolation.
Exactly. And that cycle can be incredibly difficult to break.
It makes sense.
It would require a fundamental shift in their beliefs,
Uh-huh.
a willingness to confront the true nature of their actions
Okay.
and the devastating consequences they have on others.
And we keep talking about this concept of the hitman
Right.
as if it's one monolithic entity.
Okay, yeah.
But, I mean, are there different types of hitmen?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah. Are some more morally detached than others?
And while Levi doesn't explicitly categorize hitmen,
Okay.
his research does suggest that there's a spectrum of detachment.
Oh, okay.
Some individuals might be more prone to rationalization and justification,
I see.
while others might struggle more with the emotional burden of their actions.
So some might fit that cold-blooded killer stereotype.
Right, exactly.
And others are maybe more conflicted,
Yeah.
more haunted by what they've done.
Precisely, and those internal conflicts can manifest in different ways.
Okay.
Some might seek solace in religion or spirituality, trying to find some kind of redemption or forgiveness for their sins.
Makes sense.
Others might turn to drugs or alcohol to numb the pain and guilt.
You mentioned earlier that Levi talks about Pete's emphasis on training.
Yes.
So what did that involve?
Well, Pete's training was a combination of physical and psychological conditioning.
So it's not just about...
He learned how to use weapons, how to plan and execute a hit,
Right.
how to evade detection. But he also received a kind of informal moral education
Oh, wow.
from his mentors, learning how to justify his actions.
Oh, wow.
How to dehumanize his targets, how to suppress his emotions.
So it's not just about learning a set of skills, it's about...
It's about adopting a whole new mindset,
Wow.
a way of seeing the world that makes this kind of violence possible.
And that mindset is constantly being reinforced.
Yes, through their interactions with other hitmen.
Right.
Through the stories they share, the rituals they engage in.
Yeah.
The code of silence they uphold, it becomes a self-contained world.
Wow.
Where the rules are different, where morality is relative.
Chilling.
It is a chilling thought.
And it makes you wonder about
Yeah.
the nature of evil, the factors that can
It does.
push someone to the fringes of society.
Right, to a place where taking a life becomes not just a possibility,
To a place where,
but a profession.
yeah, there's still so much to unpack here.
There really is.
So many layers to peel back.
And Levi's research only offers a glimpse into this dark and complex world.
But it's a glimpse that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths.
It does.
About human nature.
Yes.
About the fragility of our moral compass. And about the power of social forces to shape who we become. All right, let's pause here for a moment.
Okay.
Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And it's a lot to process.
For sure.
This isn't your typical lighthearted conversation.
No.
And it's important to acknowledge the weight of what we're discussing. Okay, so after going down this rabbit hole, what are we left with?
Right.
What have we learned?
Well, I think one thing that really stands out is that we can't simply dismiss hitmen as monsters or psychopaths.
Right. They're people.
Levi's work shows us that there's a much more complicated story behind their actions.
So it's not just about this, like, individual evil.
It's not just about individual evil, no.
Okay.
It's about the interplay of social forces, psychological conditioning, and personal choices.
Okay, so all these things kind of lead them down this path.
It's about understanding the context, the environments that foster this kind of behavior, the twisted logic that allows them to justify taking a life.
We've talked about detachment isolation.
Yeah.
The reframing of morality.
Right.
But what about the victims?
That's a really important question.
Yeah, how do hitmen deal with the very real consequences of their actions?
That's a question that Levi grapples with in his research.
Okay.
He found that hitmen often employ a variety of psychological strategies to distance themselves from the human cost of their work.
Like, what? Could you give us an example?
Sure. One common tactic is dehumanization.
Okay.
They might refer to their targets as marks or jobs.
Right.
Reducing them to objects rather than people with families and loved ones.
It's like they're putting up a wall?
It's like they're creating a mental barrier.
Yeah.
A way to block out the emotional impact of what they're doing.
Another strategy could be to just focus on the technical aspects.
Yes, absolutely. They might obsess over the details of planning execution and escape, diverting their attention away from the moral implications.
So just kind of blocking it out.
Yeah, a form of compartmentalization.
Right.
They're separating the act of killing from the emotional and moral consequences.
And this is all reinforced by this.
And this detachment is often reinforced by the culture of secrecy and silence that surrounds their profession.
A world where you can't be vulnerable.
It's a world where vulnerability is seen as weakness.
Right.
And any display of remorse or empathy could be perceived as a threat.
It creates this vicious cycle.
Exactly, creates a vicious cycle.
Where they're isolated, not just from, like, normal society, but from other hitmen, too.
Yeah, they become increasingly isolated.
Wow.
Not only from mainstream society,
Right.
but also from any possibility of genuine human connection.
Which brings us back
Yeah.
to this idea of social connection
Right.
shaping our moral compass.
One of the most important factors.
Right. So if these people were surrounded by others who challenged their worldview,
It's hard to say.
yeah, if they had people reminding them of the humanity of their victims, I
Yeah.
mean, do you think it would make a difference?
It's impossible to say for sure.
Right.
But I do believe that social isolation plays a significant role in enabling this kind of behavior.
Okay.
When we're cut off from empathy, from compassion, from the shared values that bind us together as a society,
Uh-huh.
it becomes easier to rationalize even the most horrific acts.
So this is making me think about
Yeah.
the role of society in preventing this kind of violence.
It's an important question.
What can we do to create environments that foster
Right. What can we do?
empathy, compassion,
Yeah.
a sense of shared humanity?
That's a complex question, and there are no easy answers.
Of course.
But I think it starts with recognizing that violence is not simply an individual problem.
Right.
It's a social problem.
Okay.
It's about addressing the root causes of inequality, poverty, and marginalization. That can create fertile ground for crime and brutality.
So it's about building communities
Exactly.
where everyone feels valued, respected, and connected.
It's about investing in education, mental health services, and social programs that support families and individuals in need.
Makes sense.
It's about creating a culture where violence is not glorified but condemned,
Yeah.
where empathy and compassion are seen as strengths, not weaknesses.
So this deep dive into the world of hitmen,
Yeah.
it's not just about understanding this
Right.
dark subculture.
It's about more than that.
It's about reflecting on our own values.
Yes.
Our own role in shaping a more just and humane world.
I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
By understanding the forces that can drive someone to commit such extreme acts,
No.
we can also start to identify ways to prevent those forces from taking hold in the first place.
It's about recognizing that the line between us and them
Yeah.
is not as clear
It's not black and white.
as we might think. And that we all have a responsibility
We do.
to create a world where violence is not the answer.
Well said. And perhaps that's the most valuable takeaway from this deep dive.
I agree.
It's a reminder that even in the face of darkness, there's always hope for change.
Yeah, but change requires understanding compassion and a willingness to
Yes.
confront the uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world around us.
Well said.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, explored some dark corners of the human psyche,
We have. It's been a journey.
but hopefully we've sparked some deeper thinking
Yeah?
about the nature of violence, the power of social forces,
Right.
the importance of building a world where everyone feels connected, valued, and safe.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been great having you.
Thank you for the insightful conversation.